I was shocked when I saw this, but a disturbing trend is only getting worse on TikTok. Here's what you need to know. As social media has evolved, different generations have claimed platforms as their own, and I've begun calling this the stratification of social media. Boomers settled on Facebook, millennials are at home on Instagram, Gen Z, it's TikTok. And as an aside, Gen X, they're kind of scattered about doing their own thing, on brand for them. For decades, generations have had their own music, they've had their own fashion. Now they also have their own social platforms. And recently I polled you all asking, is your church on TikTok? And to my surprise, just about 10% of you answered yes. Comparatively, more than 80% of you said your churches are active on both Instagram and Facebook. Now don't get me wrong, I'm sympathetic to the concerns of TikTok. The thing is, it's only getting more popular, especially with Gen Z. And so I worry of the consequences from churches flatly ignoring the platform of the next generation. The disturbing trend I'm worried about. Well, it's been 5 years or so since TikTok's rise to prominence. You can check the timestamps from the videos on this channel. The first ones I published about churches and TikTok around the end of 2019, that's coming up on 5 years ago. So it's been 5 years, and my audience is mostly comprised of churches that are passionate about social media, and yet despite that, just 10% of your churches are active on TikTok. If we extrapolate that to all churches, you gotta think that number is less than 1%. Why does this matter? Well, let's look at some data, namely the Digital Global StatShot report. This is the 2022 edition, and it includes two separate charts on the time spent using social media apps. One that uses data from data.ai to show average time per month, and another that uses data from Sensor Tower to show average time per day. And these are worldwide averages outside of mainland China. Data.ai's analysis indicates that the average global TikTok user now spends almost a full day, 23.6 hours each month using the platform. The report goes on to say, quote, for context, assuming that the typical person sleeps for between 7 and 8 hours per day, these latest numbers suggest that TikTok users now spend close to 5% of their waking hours watching TikTok videos, end quote. Meanwhile, Sensor Tower's figure suggests that TikTok users now spend more than 2 days, 48 hours per month using TikTok, which is even higher than the figure identified by Data.ai. These numbers are obviously staggering, especially when you consider that these are not just findings for Gen Z. These are worldwide TikTok users outside of mainland China. And yes, TikTok skews younger, but let's imagine for a moment that the platform's only users are millennials and Gen Z. Let's just say, well, that still makes up like half of the population in the world, not quite, roughly though. And if you look at most churches today, are our sanctuaries overflowing with millennials and Gen Z? For most, no. So perhaps considering where they're spending their time and being active there ourselves as churches is worthwhile. But I get it. If you look at those numbers and they just don't compute with you, like, how could people really be spending that much time on these platforms? That can't be right. There must be something wrong with the data. Here's the thing. Even if we assume that these numbers are inflated, let's say, for whatever reason, they're not baseless. So if they're not making sense, it might be because your understanding of social media, your definition for what social media is, no longer exists. Because here's the bottom line. Social media, as we've known it for 15 years, is dead. It's no longer just about following friends, family, or even influencers. Consider this, and this comes from the Global Web Index. Of the time Gen Z spends online, 41% of it is on social media, an all-time high. Why? Because what we use social media for is growing. The social graph era, the first 15 years or so of social media, where what we saw on our feeds was primarily our friend and family connections, aka your social graph, is gone. The discovery era is here now. TikTok's president of Global Business Solutions, who spent 12 years at Facebook before joining TikTok in 2019, said this in 2022, quote, Facebook is a social platform, TikTok is an entertainment platform. What does that mean? TikTok helped usher in a new era of social media because every platform copied their innovations, and in 2024, social media is just as much entertainment as it is connecting with friends and family. That's not all though. Not just entertainment, because in 2022, a Google VP made this statement at Fortune's Brainstorm Tech Conference, quote, in our studies, something like almost 40% of young people, when they're looking for a place for lunch, they don't go to Google Maps or search, they go to TikTok or Instagram. Now, if that sounds strange to you, you're not alone. When I posted about this on Facebook, Rob replied by saying, quote, I'd like to see some of these searches. That does not compute with my millennial brain. And so I'll tell you what I told Rob. Right now, I'm in the middle of planning a trip to Scandinavia in the fall. All of my searches are starting on TikTok for local restaurants and activities. Similarly, I needed an orzo recipe for a weeknight recently, and my searches for that started on Instagram. I didn't go to Google first. Why? Well, because without even thinking about it, I trusted TikTok and Instagram to do a better job of surfacing the solutions to my needs. And the more I thought about this, the more I realized I don't want to wade through Google's promoted posts and then read some soulless listicle compiled by AI or some content farm about the best places to eat in Stockholm, and then have to dodge video banners about the new Ford F-150 or scroll past what feels like 500-page sections on a typical recipe website in 2024 just to get to the ingredients. Except the page won't load because there are so many pixels loading in the background, so much JavaScript, so many third-party pop-ups and ads, and I'm just getting a white page with no content whatsoever no matter how many times I refresh because it's all trying to load at once. The alternative? Just watch a video some person shot on their phone as they were actually in Stockholm recently, or just watch a nice person make some orzo from scratch, and then read the comments to see what people are saying about the recipe when they made it themselves. And I'd do the same thing if you dropped me in Oslo right now and I needed lunch in the next 30 minutes. Maybe you wouldn't. That's all right. This isn't saying you should change, but simply emphasizing that you need to know about the broad changes going on around you. Because young people especially are beginning to favor social platforms for search instead of traditional search engines. This shift is a massive one. So add search engine to the modern definition of social media. Finally, social media is the top source of brand discovery and product research for Gen Z. This comes from the Global Web Index again. Social is becoming a one-stop shop for how we make purchases. So if you think about it this way, in the previous era, our time on social media was largely consumed by interacting with friends and family. Today, this has expanded dramatically to include entertainment, search, commerce, and education. The old social media is dead, a new era has begun. And so when you evaluate through that lens, yeah, 5% of waking time being spent on TikTok is still alarming, but it's not just watching funny cat videos. It's finding recipes, it's keeping up with the news, it's getting inspiration for outfits, it's tracking with friends and family, it's searching for dinner spots this weekend, it's planning trips. Social is becoming more and more ingrained into the fabric of our lives because it's expanding, which makes the church's absence on a platform like TikTok that much more concerning. Which of course leads us to the big question we're all asking. Is TikTok safe? Recently I got a DM from a church asking it this way, quote, "Is TikTok safe? I've seen your posts about Gen Z. We want to be able to reach anyone possible to have an extra chance to hear the gospel or even hear the name of Jesus." The hesitation is from our marketing team leader who feels like TikTok might be unsafe from a government standpoint / cyber security, end quote. And look, I get it. TikTok has very real concerns. Just consider the 2-year Guardian investigation suggesting TikTok has struggled to prevent criminals from using its platform to buy and sell children for sex. And this led to the head of TikTok apologizing in front of Congress, saying, quote, "I'm sorry for everything you have all been through. No one should go through the things that your families have suffered, and this is why we invest so much, and we are going to continue doing industry-wide efforts to make sure no one has to go through the things that your families have had to suffer," end quote. Except that was not the head of TikTok, it was Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Meta, earlier this year, in front of Congress. That being said, it is an election year in the US, and a foreign government interfering in the American election would of course be awful. TikTok would certainly be the biggest concern there, right? Right? Well, this quote is from detailed disclosures sent to Congress in 2017 on the heels of the 2016 election, and spoiler alert, the disclosures were not from TikTok. Quote, "Russian agents intending to sow discord among American citizens disseminated inflammatory posts that reached 126 million users on Facebook, published more than 131,000 messages on Twitter, and uploaded over 1,000 videos to Google's YouTube service." All right, enough of me being glib. The intent of this video is not to convince your church to use TikTok. Truly, at its core, this video is about values, because a value only has weight when it's applied consistently, not selectively. If your church opts not to use TikTok, I get it, so long as we're not selectively applying our values. Otherwise, those aren't values at all. That's just personal preference masquerading as principle. I said the same thing to this person on Instagram who commented, quote, "The concerns about what can be posted on TikTok scare me, and if we post there, we invite our young people onto the platform, and who knows what else they'll see when on there, because it won't just be our content." But can't that be said about every platform? This comment was made on Instagram. Instagram is the springboard for most OnlyFans accounts. Are we concerned about that? Or do we turn a blind eye to that? Do we downplay that concern because, hey, we're already active on the platform? My TikTok feed is just girls dancing. Have you ever heard a pastor or church leader say something like that? A similar sentiment. And here's the truth. Your social feeds are a mirror. Want a real sober look at yourself? I don't recommend this to everyone. Hit the screen record on your phone. Then open your social apps one by one and start scrolling. Hit stop, then watch it back. There was a saying I heard a lot growing up: show me your bank account and I'll show you your values. Well, you don't need bank statements for this anymore. Your For You page is even more honest. Remember, the number one goal of any social platform is to keep you in the app as long as possible. The longer you spend on the platform, the more money they make. So they have zero incentive to show you content you truly don't want to see. So the question becomes, is your feed really full of content you don't like, or are your watch habits not matching your stated values? I know this is not going to be a popular video. Again, my goal here is not to convince your church to start using TikTok against your will. If nothing else, I'd really just love for you to evaluate your church's decisions on social media through a consistent lens. Because here's the thing. At the time of this recording, the Ban TikTok bill has cleared the House of Representatives in the US and is waiting to be discussed in the Senate. President Biden has said he will sign the bill if it makes it through the Senate. Right now, there doesn't seem to be a ton of urgency on the part of the Senate to do that, but with that being said, if it does go through, what would it actually mean? The idea is to force ByteDance, TikTok's Beijing-based parent company, to sell its stake in TikTok within 6 months of the bill's passing to a qualified buyer. 6 months is key. Qualified buyer is key. And you might think, Brady, if this app is just going to get banned in 6 months, why would my church even spend time there? Well, let's look a little bit deeper. Firstly, if the bill gets passed, surely it will be besieged by lawsuits, which could extend that 6-month window. And then we have to consider who these potential buyers would even be. The price tag for TikTok is going to be astronomical. 50 billion, 100 billion, whatever it is. The price tag is going to be so high, there will only be a handful of even potential qualified buyers. Like the tech giants, right? Meta, Microsoft, Google. The thing is, the US government has spent the last few years suing the big tech companies under the theory that they're too big. So would President Biden allow one of these big companies to buy TikTok while simultaneously trying to break them up? Basically, it's just important to emphasize that the potential number of buyers for a sale of this magnitude is small. That's not the part of this that fascinates me the most, though, because remember that 6-month selling window? That window that could be extended because of lawsuits? Well, who will be the president of the United States at the end of those 6 months? You might remember one of President Trump's last acts as president was executive orders to accelerate the sale of TikTok to an American entity. Biden withdrew those orders. So it's obvious, right? Trump would be for the sale of TikTok. Not so fast. In fact, Trump now says he's against the sale of TikTok. Why might that be? Let me read you this excerpt from Reuters. Quote, "The biggest donor in this US election cycle is Jeffrey Yass, a libertarian trading firm owner who started off as a professional poker player and is now a major investor in TikTok's Chinese owner, ByteDance. Yass, 65, was thrust into the spotlight this month after Trump, the Republican presidential candidate, reversed course on his preference for banning TikTok, saying that a ban would hurt some children and only strengthen Meta. Trump made the comments days after he met Yass at a gathering of the Conservative Club for Growth donor group in Florida. The U-turn on TikTok amid a major cash crunch led to speculation that Trump may be trying to court Yass." No one knows how this TikTok ban situation is going to play out. Nobody knows. But shifting gears, I do want to show you some churches that are doing great things on TikTok to encourage you on the possibilities. The first is at I Am One Church, posting their preaching clips. They've been active on TikTok for a handful of years now, close to 300,000 followers on TikTok. And after TikTok's growth came their growth on Instagram. They're over 100,000 there now. We did an interview with this church last year to talk about how their efforts online have translated to in-person. That podcast is linked in the description. Here's a comment from user Amritha on Instagram on one of my posts dedicated to TikTok recently. Quote, "We are getting more and more non-Christian TikTok users visiting our church. It's amazing. Yes, there are scary things on TikTok, but when they see an invitation to come to church, it grips some of their hearts enough to take that step to visit church. It's about the invitation." Finally, last year, we started working with Gateway Church in Winterville, North Carolina. They signed up for our custom social media service for churches, Social Sermons. They weren't active on TikTok at the time. We were creating some sermon clips for them. So I told their Pastor John, look, we might as well post these on TikTok, see what happens. Pastor John writes me back about a month later saying, quote, "I was at work last week. I am a bivocational pastor. And someone that I work with about once a month came up to me and they said, 'Are you a minister? Because you showed up on my TikTok feed.' Then it happened again. This from Pastor John again. Quote, "I was picking up a grocery order at the supermarket and a guy comes up to me and says, 'Are you a pastor?' And when I said yes, he responded, 'You showed up on my TikTok feed. My wife and I are looking for a church and we are going to be checking yours out.'" You can see the full case study on Gateway Church at socialsermons.com, also linked in the description. But the bottom line is this. Pastor John said it this way: people are seeing us, knowing that our church is here, and we're getting the gospel in front of people that we otherwise would not be able to reach. So, what is this trend your church needs to watch out for? We're 5 years into TikTok in the mainstream, and our churches have neglected it even as Gen Z and millennials have claimed it as their number one platform. And we as churches did not neglect Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube like this. Does TikTok have real concerns? Yeah. Are those concerns exclusive to TikTok? I would argue no. The percentage of people that claim religious affiliation in the United States is declining across every generation, and so I worry of the consequences from churches flatly ignoring the platform of the next generation, a generation that is already the least religious in the country's history. If you want to dive deeper into the state of social media, watch my recent video titled What Every Church Must Know About the YouTube Algorithm. It's linked on the screen right now and in the description. And thanks as always for your time, attention, and trust. We'll talk real soon.